You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Trump's new NATO claim exposes a surreal disconnect with reality, based on an article by The Conversation. Trump wants credit for a war he is managing by neglect. The power is in Washington. The useful fact in this story is not whether Ukrainians like Trump. It is that Trump controls the levers: military aid, diplomatic pressure, intelligence sharing, sanctions waivers, and the symbolic weight of the U.S. presidency. When he cut military aid, left a promised $400 million package unreleased, and pressed Ukraine to surrender Donbas to satisfy Putin, that was not confusion. That was policy. The article's polling numbers are real evidence, but they sit inside a deeper structure of power. Ukrainians are living with the consequences of decisions made in Washington, not the moods of Washington's self-presentation. The poll is not the story. The headline question is framed like a referendum on Trump's personality. That is a dodge. The actual story is that only 17% of Ukrainians see him as a friend, while more than twice that number see him as an enemy. That is not just dislike. It is a judgment on conduct. And the judgment is rational. Trump has openly praised Putin, scolded Zelensky, and treated Ukraine like a bargaining chip in a deal he wants to force through. The polling does not create the political meaning. It exposes it. Diplomacy by surrogate. Zelensky invited Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to Kyiv because the Trump team had already chosen optics over responsibility. They were willing to go to Moscow, but not Kyiv, unless there was something new to discuss, as if Ukraine were a venue problem and not the country being attacked. That isn't serious mediation. It is patronage dressed up as negotiation. If Trump's envoys will not even show up where the damage is being absorbed, then they are not there to understand Ukraine. They are there to manage a narrative for the White House. Aid withheld. Blood spilled. The most brutal detail in the source is also the clearest indictment. Patriot missiles were diverted to the Middle East after the U.S.-Israeli attacks of February 28, 2026. Ukraine's stockpiles ran down. More Russian missiles got through. Civilian deaths in June hit a 3-year high. That is what Q of wars means in practice. Ukrainian lives placed behind another theater in a hierarchy decided by Washington. The U.S. can still provide intelligence, still keep sanctions in place, still posture as broker, and still make Ukraine pay the price when the White House reallocates defenses elsewhere. That is not a neutral foreign policy. It is strategic abandonment with paperwork. Americans are not Trump. The cleanest data point in the piece is the one that should embarrass the people running U.S. policy. Ukrainians still overwhelmingly view Americans as friends. They can separate a population from its president, which is more maturity than the Trump administration deserves. That distinction matters because it tells you where legitimacy still lives. It is not in Trump's diplomacy or in his handlers, or in the ritual of Summit Theater. It survives in the idea that ordinary Americans are not identical to a presidency that flirts with Putin, withholds aid, and demands gratitude for the privilege of being squeezed. The larger pattern is straightforward. Authoritarian politics does not always announce itself with tanks. Sometimes it arrives through leverage, delay, selective aid, and the deliberate confusion of responsibility. Trump harms Ukraine, then asks to be judged on tone. His envoys bypass Kiev, then present themselves as serious. His administration reallocates air defenses, then speaks the language of peace. The framing problem is the point. It encourages readers to debate Trump's image instead of his power. But the consequences are not cosmetic. They are measured in missed intercepts, ruined cities, and dead civilians. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article, with the automated voice of Ryan. Thanks for listening.